hope. And we're going to start off with a little bit of a riddle this morning because I like riddles. If you've heard this one, don't jump out and tell the answer, especially if you're wrong. It might be a little embarrassing. So, some of you may have heard this riddle. A father and son take a trip, but before they reach their destination, they are involved in a bad accident. Both are critically injured, and because of their injuries, they're transported to two separate hospitals. When the son gets wheeled into the operating room, the surgeon looks down and says, "I cannot operate on this boy, for he is my son." How is this possible? Now, if you know the answer to that riddle, you have to understand expectations. Because your mind is playing out a scenario and you expect a certain thing with certain individuals in that riddle. And I won't tell you the answer to it right away. I'll let you think about it for a little bit. But we'll get to it at the end of the sermon, hopefully. Now, whether you enjoy riddles or jokes or mysteries, they all play on expectations. Expectations are beliefs or ideas that come from our own personal beliefs and experiences. They come from a person's own thought process while examining evidence. That's expectations. And we have expectations in our life every single day. You wake up expecting things every single day. If I made the statement that tomorrow morning I expect the sun to rise in the morning, I would be hard-pressed to find anyone in this congregation that would argue that point. Only maybe Silas, if you want to be a little bit ignorant and obstinate this morning. But he would never do that to me because he knows that I'm a very delicate person, right? No one is going to argue that point that the sun is going to come up tomorrow, right? We have, through experience in our lives, found that the sun rises in the morning and sets at night. That's our experience. And we expect that to happen every single day. And if it doesn't, we're going to be very, very concerned. In our daily expectations, there are many, many things that we expect in our day. Whether it's the season that we're in, we expect winter to be cold, although in the last few years here in Ohio, we haven't got much cold or snow or anything else like that, maybe a week or two. All right? But we expect spring to bring rejuvenation and things to grow. We expect summer to be hot and we enjoy being outside, and fall for the 2 single weeks of fall that we get around here. We expect to see some color in the leaves to fall and things to die down and everything else like that. We have expectations of our job, of our friends, of our family. We have expectations all the time for many, many different individuals and people in our lives. But when things don't go as expected, we find out how we deal with those things. Continued loss of expectation, whether that's from a person or your job or through circumstances beyond your control, tend to have a negative connotation or emotion attached to them. If we expect something to happen in our life and it doesn't, then we tend to attach negativity to that. Continued negative impact and negative expectations in our life lead to bitterness, disappointment, discouragement, anger, right? So if we continue to experience those things, it can affect us. Some of my own personal expectations that I will share with you this morning. When I first got married to my lovely, lovely wife, she got up with me every morning and packed my lunch. Now, I didn't expect that. I loved it when she did it for me, but I switched jobs soon after we got married, and I went to work a lot earlier in the morning than I did when we first got married. And she was like, "Honey, I love you, but I am not getting up that early." Now, if I expected her to continue doing those things, and she didn't, I could have gotten angry, disappointed, discouraged. But I did, because I know that her love for me is more than getting up in the morning to pack my lunch. Now, I will tell you that she does wait for me every evening when I come home and takes my lunch from me when I come through the door. Now, if I would say that is the key to a successful marriage, that is a simple statement. And it doesn't work for every single person. So my expectations may not be your expectations. And the expectations we all have for each other are different because we are different individuals. As I was growing up, my dad could fix anything with a motor. He had that knowledge, he had that ability. He was very good with mechanical things. I did not get that talent. Okay? If my wife expected me to be like my dad and be able to fix anything around the house that broke, she's going to be very disappointed in my ability. Now, I got a different talent from my mother. I was able to cook. And I think that's why my wife did marry me, because I could make her the food. So I have that expectation that I can make good food. All right? But I can't fix much of anything if it goes broke around the house. I struggle with that completely. Now, the joke around my family lately has been that everyone, as you get older, you start resembling your parents. Sorry, guys, but it's going to happen one way or the other. Right? You're going to take on some attributes of your family members. And lately, as I have been, I had a great aunt that celebrated her 90th birthday this last week. So we went over and celebrated. And a few of my older cousins would come in periodically as they were coming in to wish my great aunt a happy birthday at her house. And one of my cousins came in the door. She said hello to my mother, and I stepped up and went to greet her, and she's like, "Hello, Jerry," which is my dad's name. So I'm just like, not the right person, but it's been the joke in the family that as I get older, I have similar mannerisms, and I look, I talk, I walk, and do things like my dad does. So while that may not have been my expectation, that's what a lot of other people see in me at that time. All right, they remind me of my dad. So I get called my dad's name every once in a while now. I hope you like that voice, because it's going to happen someday or another. All right? Parents have expectations of their children, right? Whether you admit it or not, your parents, kids, have expectations of you. All right? Whether they ever share those with you or not, they have them in their mind, planted deep inside. When our daughters were going to college, one of them is in college, Michaela is not, most of you know Michaela. She took college while she was in high school. And I can share this because she's not here right now. I know her mother had an expectation in her mind that she wanted her to go and get her bachelor's degree, maybe get her master's degree. She never shared that with her, all right? But it was an expectation that she could do it. Michaela, she's like, I took 2 years of college and high school, and I am done. I do not want to take any more. Right? That was not her expectation. And we did not push her on that, because it wasn't her expectation. If we would have forced her to go to college, she would have resented it probably. She was done with school, she had her job, she knew what she wanted to do, she was on her path. And it was her decision. So we didn't push. The last expectation, I will share a story that just happened. On Fridays, I work 4 days of the week. So on Fridays, that's my day off. And I, most of you know, am a avid bird watcher. Birds are my thing. I have been so intrigued by them throughout my life that anytime I have spare time, that's my hobby. Whether it's taking pictures of them, catalog them. On Fridays, I've gotten to be able to get with a group of people that band birds through migration, spring and fall. That's what I do on my days off on Friday. I help band birds. All right? I love it. It's great. It's a passion of mine. I'm in with this group, and we talk bird talk all the time. When I was a kid growing up, I thought I was a nerd and a weirdo, because living in a community like this, and I was in this community growing up, right, no one else really liked birds all that much. And I would know things. And I can remember in my 7th grade science class, growing up, my teacher was Mrs. Betzer at Pittsford High School, right? She gave us this worksheet, and it was on the scientific bill shapes of certain birds. And she was like, I know none of you know this at all. We're going to go through this together as a class. And she's like, can anybody tell me what bill this bird belongs to? And I immediately raised my hand, and I'm like, yes, I know that, Mrs. Betzer. And she's like, yes, Paul, that's very good. Good job. And so she's like, okay, let's try the second one. And I immediately shopped, and she's like, do you have the cheat sheet on this? Do you know the answer? How do you know this? And all my friends, of course, knew that I was a bird weirdo. And they're like, he's the bird man. He knows his stuff. And so that was my one moment to shine in 7th grade science class, because I knew all the birds, right? But, getting carried away here, on Fridays, I go and I band birds. And so every Friday morning, I get up about the same time that I would get up to go to work. And I go out and we band birds in a march. And my wife tells me the same thing every Friday morning when I kiss her goodbye in the morning. She's like, please be careful. Don't do anything stupid. All right? And I tell her the same thing every single Friday. I say, honey, I'm banding birds. What trouble could I get into? And she knows better than to rely on that answer. So a couple Fridays ago, we went and banded birds, and I went and I was trudging through the marsh, and there's a path that I have been to this place before, and I should know better, but I didn't, because I'm a guy. And I go, and this path is overgrown with weeds and briars and everything else like that, and I'm like, there's a bird on the other side of that patch. I need to go find out what it is. I can hear it. I know what it is, but I need to see it. So I go trudging through, and I'm putting my head down, and I'm just charging through these weeds. And I'm thinking, if my wife was here, she would tell me, this is a stupid idea, Paul. What are you doing? And I said, I should listen to that voice. She told me to stay out of trouble. Then the other voice in my head says, but she's not here right now. And you need to find this bird. And so I go trudging through, and I'm barreling through these weeds. And all of a sudden, it was during that week, a couple weeks ago, when it was like 90 degrees outside, 95 degrees outside. And so I'm like, whew, I need to stop, because I am sweating like a bullet. And that's when I realized not only am I sweating from my head, my shins are starting to ache really, really bad. I'm like, it's fine, we're gonna push through, and we're gonna go. And so I'm like, I can see the other side of this patch. We are just gonna put our head down and go, because I'm a guy, and that's what we do, right? And so I get moving, and I go, and I go, and I go. I get to where I think the patch should end, and there's a whole new patch that has grown up in front of me, and I'm just like, woo! I am winded, I am torn, and then as I bend down to catch my breath, I look at my shins, and I'm like, whew, that's going to hurt later on. And I will show you. So I got a few scrapes and scratches on my shins there, and I knew that I was going to be in trouble, because when I got home, my wife was going to see what I did. So when I got home that night, I came in and she goes, how was your day? And I go, honey, I am an old man. And she's like, why did you say this? And I said, honey, I am so out of shape. I am just getting old. I don't know if I should be doing it. And she's like, what did you do? And I told her, what do you mean? And she goes, you did something, didn't you? And I'm like, no. And she's like, yes, you did. Tell me what you did. I said, you'll figure it out soon enough. So she knew I was up to something, and I had done something that I shouldn't have done. And I knew that I wasn't going to be able to conceal those things for very long. And sure enough, as soon as I took a shower and sat down beside her, she and I were sitting on the couch, and she's talking, and then she's like, "What happened to your legs?" I'm like, "I may have gone through some weeds after a bird." And she's like, "Why would you do that?" I said, "Because it's what's expected of me. I'm expected to know what birds are. I'm expected to go find these birds, and I need to go find these birds." And she's like, "You need to have someone with you." And so expectations can get you into trouble if you aren't in control of things. This morning, we're going to look at some people in the Bible that had expectations and what happened when things didn't exactly go the way they expected. So if you'll turn with me this morning, we're going to be in the Old Testament, Genesis chapter 37 this morning, starting off. And we're going to hop around a little bit. So if you need to get those fingers flexed and loosened up, go ahead and do that this morning. We're going to start in chapter 37, verse 5. We're going to be talking about Joseph this morning. Starting in verse 5, it says, "Joseph had a dream, and when he told it to his brothers, they hated him all the more. He said to them, 'Listen to this dream I had. We were binding sheaves of grain out in the field, when suddenly my sheaf rose up and stood upright, while your sheaves gathered around mine and bowed down to it.' His brothers said to him, 'Do you intend to reign over us? Will you actually rule us?' And they hated him all the more because of his dreams and what he had said. Then he had another dream, and he told it to his brothers. 'Listen,' he said, 'I had another dream, and this time the sun and the moon and the 11 stars were bowing down to me.' When he told his father, as well as his brothers, his father rebuked him and said, 'What is this dream you had? Will your mother and I and your brothers actually come and bow down to the ground before you?' His brothers were jealous of him, but his father kept the matter in mind." Now Joseph was the youngest of all his brothers at this point in time. Benjamin had not been born yet, so he was the youngest brother in the tribe. Now, I have a little bit of experience. Might go off here. Maybe I or my battery's running out. One of the two. Anyways, I'll try and speak loudly. Joseph is the youngest brother of his family. Now, I have a little bit of experience with that. I am the oldest brother. I have two younger brothers. Right? I know how interesting they can be at times. We older brothers know what's right, know how to lead the family. We don't need opinions of the younger brothers in our mind. So, as Dan comes up here. Joseph is telling his brothers the audacity that he might someday rule over them as the youngest brother. In Old Testament times, that was akin to saying, "I am better than you. Nah, 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 ha, 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 blah, 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 blah." All right? The youngest brothers did not receive an inheritance, or if they did, they got a very, very smaller portion of the older brothers' estate of the father's estate. They had jealousy on him. Now, I'm not going to be at the point. I've heard it said that Joseph, there we go. 1, 2. As the youngest brother, all right, Joseph is not that younger brother. I don't believe Joseph's that younger brother. that is flaunting his favorite status among the family. God is using Joseph at this point in time. If Joseph was boastful and proud, I believe that God would have dealt with him in that time. I don't believe that God would use Joseph the way he used him if Joseph was being boastful or proud of this fact. Right? I think he was just trying to explain to his brothers, look, having these dreams, I think they mean something. I don't think he was taking joy in this. I think he was just trying to find his way in the family. Okay? That's just my opinion. But his brothers did not see it that way. All right? Joseph had an expectation that he would lead his family one day, and eventually he would, but not the way he assumed it to be. His brothers had different expectations. They expected him to know his place in the family. They expected him to be a younger brother, not claim to be able to rule over them someday. All right? If Gavin back there in the corner told all his other brothers, I'm going to rule over you, I think they would have some issues with him saying that. And they might deal with him a little harshly. All right? Maybe a couple Dutch rubs, a nugget or two, maybe an atomic wedge, I don't know, because ours was still a thing today, who knows? Okay? But Joseph's brothers, all right, took it a little bit farther than that. All right? They expected Joseph to know his place in line, and when he didn't and continued to share these dreams that he had, they decided to do something about it. Of course, we all know the story. Joseph's brothers went out and actually were intent on killing their brother. All right? Reuben, one of the older brothers, said, hey, let's just take a minute, cool our thoughts. All right? It doesn't do us any good to kill him. We gain nothing from that. So instead, they threw him in a dry cistern and said, let's think this through. As some traveling gypsies came through, they said, hey, at least we can make some money off the kid. He wants to run his mouth. So they sold him as a slave into the hands of an Egyptian servant. Joseph continues. All right, at this point in time, he has, again, Joseph has expectations to lead his family, but now he's been sold as a slave. That's not what he expected. I'm sure of it. Okay? How he was ever going to see his family again, I'm sure he was wondering if he would ever see his family again. But at this point in time, Joseph has a choice. Do I give up this expectation, or do I continue on doing what I know I should do? He's sold into a completely new scenario, into a servant, Potiphar, who puts him in charge of his household, and lo and behold, everything that Joseph does benefits Potiphar. Joseph shows himself valued to a complete stranger and is rewarded for it. Joseph does everything right until Potiphar's wife wants him to sleep with her. And he says, you are my master's wife, not going to happen. I am not going to do that. And then she makes up a lie to get Joseph in trouble. Now, Joseph did everything right up to that point. And he got blamed for something he did not do. And gets thrown into prison. Now, at this point in time, Joseph's like, I told my dreams to my brother, they wanted to kill me, they sold me as a slave, I may never see my family again, I did everything right for my new master, got shipped off to prison. At this point in time, most of us would be like, that's it, I give up, not doing this anymore. But again, there's something about Joseph that carries him through. While in prison, he gets put in charge of the prison. And shockingly, everything goes well. He meets the cupbearer and the baker of Pharaoh. And again, we all know the story. They both have dreams. He correctly interprets their dreams and says, don't forget me. I was put here wrongfully. When you get out, and are put back in your place, remember me. Remember who I am, who helped you get out of here. And of course, the baker gets his head taken off, but the cupbearer gets put back in place in the service of Pharaoh and forgets him. And again, Joseph is in prison where he shouldn't be. He's thinking, I'm trying to do things right. And I get bupkis. Right? I'm forgotten. I'm put in somewhere where I did not belong. But Pharaoh has dreams, and no one can interpret them. And all of a sudden, a little light goes off in the cupbearer's head. Ding! Hey, I know a guy. He told me the dream that I had, and it came out true. Maybe he can do the same thing for you, Pharaoh. So Pharaoh brings in Joseph, and of course, Joseph interprets Pharaoh's dreams correctly. Pharaoh puts him in charge, and what do you know? He has a plan for Pharaoh's dreams, and everything works out great. Perfectly, in fact. Joseph gets put in charge of almost all of Egypt under Pharaoh. And then the famine comes. And everything all of a sudden comes full circle. Alright? Everyone is running out of food, except for Egypt, who was in charge of Joseph, who knew the famine was coming, and have food stored up for 7 years, because that's how long the famine is going to last. And Joseph's brothers come looking for food, and guess who's in charge? Joseph. Joseph saves his entire family, and eventually, through a lot of circumstances, right, has his family move into Egypt with him, saves his family through the famine because of his trust in God. Right? It was a long, long process. And Joseph could at any point in time said, you know what? This is not the dream that I had. There is no way this is going to work out the way I expected it to work out. But he kept going on. Whether he had hope, whether he trusted in God, whether he just had that ambitious spirit. No, we don't know what it is. But Joseph continued to do what he needed to do to move on with his life and try to get in a better scenario. And it worked out where it came through, just like he thought, just like he imagined, just not like he expected. He saves his entire family through his work and through the circumstances that bring him to that point. If he had stayed with his family, who would know if they would have survived through the famine? Probably not. Moving on, I'm going to take a look at a couple other people in the Bible. If you'll skip back just a few chapters to chapter 29, Genesis 29, we're going to look at Joseph's dad, Jacob. And I'm going to start in verse 16 of Genesis chapter 29. Jacob had left his family and was looking for a cousin of his named Laban, and that's where we're going to pick up this story. Jacob had been with Laban for about a month, and it was working for him. And verse 16, we pick up the story. It says, Now Laban had 2 daughters. The name of the older was Leah, and the name of the younger was Rachel. Leah had weak eyes. Poor Leah. All right? I feel for Leah, not our Leah, of course. She does not have weak eyes at all. All right? But Leah, every time I read that verse, I actually don't think of our Leah. I think about something else. I am a 70s, 80s kid. All right? The Muppet Show was huge when I was a kid. All right? We would watch it on Friday nights. We would have pizza. We watched the Muppet Show, and then we had to go to bed because then my mom could watch Dallas. So that was our Friday nights growing up. I love The Muppet Christmas Carol. It's like one of my favorite Christmas movies. And there is a line in there. I don't know if it's from the Bible or not, but Miss Piggy is married to Kermit, and Kermit is Tiny Tim's dad in the show. And so when Tiny Tim, is about ready to die, she's like, "Oh, I have got to be strong for your father. He would not want me to have weak eyes." And that is the line in the Muppet Christmas Carol. And every time I hear that, I laugh like crazy because I'm thinking, I wonder if that's a reference to poor Leah in the Bible. I'll never know, probably, but that's what I always chuckle about. But anyways, sorry. Verse 17, Leah had weak eyes, but Rachel was lovely in form and beautiful. Jacob was in love with Rachel and said, "I will work for 7 years in return for your younger daughter Rachel." All right, guys, if you had to work 7 years for your wife, if any of us get married, come on, be honest here, okay? All right? I would like to think that I would have done it for my wife, but 7 years is a long time to work for free, right? To be able to marry your love of your life. Now that is some dedication. And when they made that statement, when Jacob made that statement to Laban, "I will work 7 years for you to marry Rachel." That is a pretty direct and exact statement. Okay? There's not a lot of leeway in that. So Laban said, "It's better that I give her to you than to some other man. Stay here with me." So Jacob served 7 years to get Rachel. But they seemed like only a few days. Young love. Tim, because of his love for her. Then Jacob said to Laban, "Give me my wife. My time is completed, and I want to lie with her." So Laban brought together all the people of the place and gave a feast. But when evening came, he took his daughter Leah and gave her to Jacob. And Jacob lay with her. And Laban gave his servant girl Zilpah to his daughter as her maidservant. When morning came, there was Leah. So Jacob said to Laban, "What is this you have done to me? I served you for Rachel, didn't I? Why have you deceived me?" All right, first of all, I am a little bit concerned about Jacob at this point in time. He's worked 7 years for Laban with eyes only for Rachel, and then all of a sudden he can't tell the difference on the wedding night. I'm like, who has the weak eyes here, really? I mean, come on. Jacob, you've been looking at this girl for 7 years, and you can't tell the difference? Maybe she was gowned up like the little boy on the Christmas Story. Looked like a tip for underwater diving or something. I don't know. That's the only grace I'm giving Jacob at this point in time, okay? Because he should have been able to sell Leah from Rachel 12 miles away, just by the way she walked, okay? But for other reasons, let's say he was so enamored and overjoyed with the wedding night that he just completely lost all sense and doesn't know. So Laban switches his oldest daughter for his youngest daughter. And Jacob's like, "What is the deal? I worked 7 years for you." Now, Jacob had an expectation. He had an expectation to be marrying Rachel, not Leah. All right? I would wager that any one of us in here, if they had spent 7 years of their life working for their wife and got the old switcheroo at that point in time, they might not have been so happy or pleased with Laban at that point in time. Laban says in verse 26, "It is not our custom here to give the younger daughter in marriage before the older one." Do you think you could have told me that, Laban, sometime in the last 7 years? Come on now. So, finish this daughter's bridal week, then we'll give you the younger one also, in return for another 7 years of work. You want Rachel? You're going to have to work for me for another 7 years. How much do you love her, Jacob? All right, now, first of all, I know this was Old Testament times, and I know that's not how we deal with things now. But I'm thinking, this is not the way to start a marriage. Hey, I married the wrong daughter. We're just going to push her to the side while I work another 7 years for the one that I really like. Okay? There's going to be some tension there. All right? And obviously, if you know the story, you know they did. So Jacob did, and he finished his week with Leah, moving on in verse 28. And then Laban gave him his daughter Rachel to his wife after another 7 years. Okay, again, Jacob expects to be marrying Rachel. He doesn't get that. Most people would be really ticked off. They were very direct in that statement of what he expected. Laban pulled the old switcheroo on him and gave him the oldest daughter first. And then said, well, if you want Rachel, all you have to do is work another 7 years. All right, so now he hasn't worked 7 years for Rachel. He's actually worked 14 years for her. You better really, really love her. Which he does. But Jacob could have, rightly so, been disgusted, disappointed, angry, could have taken the route of Joseph's brothers and said, maybe I'll just take a big wedge maul to the side of your head and take your daughter anyways. Alright? But he doesn't. Works another 7 years to get his daughter that he really loves, to start off their family. Alright? Expectations are neither good nor bad. It's all how we deal with them and what happens. Every one of us in here has had expectations that didn't go the way we expected them to go. And how we deal with that defines who we are and how God uses us. We've got a couple more examples. Skip to the back of your book now. We're going to be in John chapter 5. Fourth book of the New Testament, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Chapter 5. Starting in verse 1, John chapter 5. We're at the healing pool called Bethesda. Sometime later, in verse 1, here we go. Sometime later, Jesus went up to Jerusalem for a feast of the Jews. Now there in Jerusalem, near the sheep gate, a pool, which in Aramaic is called Bethesda, and which is surrounded by 5 colored colonnades. Here is a great number of disabled people used to lie, the blind, the lame, the paralyzed. One who was there had been an invalid for 38 years. When Jesus saw him lying there and learned that he had been in this condition for a long time, he asked him, "Do you want to get well?" "Sir," the invalid replied, "I have no one to help me into the pool when the water stirred. While I am trying to get in, someone else goes down ahead of me." Then Jesus said to him, "Get up, pick up your mat and walk." At once the man was cured. He picked up his mat and walked. Now, this is an invalid who had been in this condition and been sitting by the pool for 38 years. But he had this condition for 38 years. He went to the pool because he expected that was his cure. He had been there for a number of years trying to get to the pool when it got stirred up because he believed that the pool was his only way of being healed. Now, I'm sure that he'd had doctors see him over the years, and I'm sure that he had people try and help him heal himself over the years, and everything failed, and this was his last shot. Okay? All he expected was to try and get into this pool to heal himself. And he would be constantly, he's an invalid, he cannot walk, so he parks himself as close to the pool as possible. And when his chance comes to get to the pool, other people are quicker than he is. And so, expectation after expectation after expectation. He continually fails in this process. And his attitude reflects that. Here is someone, an individual, who reacts exactly the opposite of Joseph and Jacob. He lets the expectations beat him down and has almost no hope left. And even when Jesus, who he doesn't know at the time, comes to him and says, "Do you want to be healed?" Obviously, the answer to that, which should be a resounding yes. Can you help me? But no, he's so focused on the pool, he doesn't understand Jesus is asking him, "Do you want this healing? I can provide this healing." He's so stuck on the pool and all the past disappointments. You can almost feel the rejection in the statement. He has been beat down over the years because of failed expectations after failed expectations. Once Jesus heals him and tells him to pick up his mat and walk, Jesus so far exceeded his expectations, he's beyond overjoyed. If you continue on reading those verses, gets up, goes to the temple, is walking all over the place. I imagine, in my mind, he was doing the old skip and jump, walking through the temple, everything else like that. Right? When we have someone exceed our expectations, we're never disappointed in that. If our daughter, who's at PG right now, took her car there to go and drive around town, if we said, "Here, you have this brand new car," we will not. But if we gave her a brand new car to go off to college and exceeded her expectations, I'm sure she wouldn't be like, "That's all right, I'll just take the old clunker, it's fine, I don't need that." No one needs a new car. All right? Whenever someone exceeds our expectations, we're always way happier about that than just meeting the expectation. One last one we're going to look at this morning. We flip over to Acts. Acts chapter 3. Again, starting in verse 1. It says, "One day Peter and John were going up to the temple at the time of prayer at 3 p.m. Now a man crippled from birth was being carried to the temple gate called Youth, where he was put every day to bed from those going into the temple courts. When he saw Peter and John about to enter, he asked them for money. Peter looked straight at him, as did John. Then Peter said, 'Look at us.' So the man gave them his attention, expecting to get something from them. Then Peter said, 'Silver or gold I do not have, but what I have I give you in the name of Jesus Christ of Nazareth. Walk.' Taking him by the right hand, he helped him up, and instantly the man's feet and ankles became strong. He jumped to his feet and began to walk. Then he went with them into the temple courts, walking and jumping and praising God. When all the people saw him walking and praising God, they recognized him as the same man who used to sit begging at the temple gate called Beautiful. And they were filled with wonder and amazement at what had happened." Again, just like this invalid by the Bethesda pool, this guy had been paralyzed since birth. So obviously, he's been there a long, long time. And it says in the verse that when Peter and John walked by, and Peter said, "Look at us," he was expecting. What was he expecting? Anything that he'd gotten previously. All his previous expectations, he was a beggar. He was expecting money. He was expecting something from Peter and John. He wasn't expecting anything more than that. because that's what his expectation was. To his point, his life experience has been, if people feel sorry for me, they're going to give me some money. Nothing more, nothing less. But Peter says, I'm going to give you something better than that. And again, the verse states, the man jumped to his feet. He went to the courts, was amazed with joys. Okay? Peter and John exceeded his expectations. And rightly so, he was overjoyed by them. Now, even the disciples who were with Jesus for 3 years had expectations about Jesus and who he was, and how Jesus' kingdom was going to come to earth. They were with him for 3 years, walking beside him, talking to him. Did they understand Jesus' plan? Of course not. They had expectations on what was going to happen, and most of them were sorely disappointed many, many, many times. As I said before, expectations, they're neither good nor bad, but we have them in our life every single day. Every single day we deal with them. And how we deal with those expectations determines how well you enjoy life. If you don't have hope when those expectations fall short or don't come to realization, if you have unfulfilled expectations, or if you have unrealistic expectations, right? If I expect to walk out of this door after service today and become an instant billionaire, that's, in my opinion, an unrealistic expectation. All right? Now, could it happen? Sure, it could happen. But the probability of it happening is pretty slim. All right? Don't think I have any long-lost relatives that are suddenly going to kick off and leave me their entirety of their fortune at that point in time. All right? And if I truly expect that to happen, I'm going to be disappointed. And if I wallow in my self-pity, oh, poor Paul, all I want is money, money, money. If I can't, God, give it to me. All right? I can cause myself to create a circle of loathing and pity and despair and oh, woe is me. All right? Joseph and Jacob did not have that cycle in their lives. Obviously. Things did not go their way, not even close. And yet they continued on and eventually got everything that they wished for, dreamed of, wanted in their lives. Okay? The two individuals in the New Testament, right? Horrible situations. I would not want to deal with being paralyzed since birth. Right? Although it probably would save me a lot of issues trudging through brush that I should be trudging through. Okay? Right? Horrible situations. And to continue to have a positive outlook in those situations is very difficult. Very difficult indeed. But to have hope in things that you can still accomplish, even in those situations, to not let life beat you down, is what we're called to do. Jesus has expectations for us. 2, in fact. Right? Those 2, love your Lord, your God, with all your heart, with all your strength, with all your mind, and all your soul. And the second is like that. Love your neighbor as yourself. As a church, God has expectations for us. God wants us to be the type of church that will love people with all our heart, with all our soul, with all our mind, and with all our strength. We have to be the church that people expect us to be those qualities. And we are that church that shows those expectations. When I look around the room and I see people like Jamie and like Ruth, I mean, how far has Ruth come in the last 3 or 4 years? She's a beautiful mother, got a beautiful child, great marriage, okay, right? And Jamie's come so far, being on the worship team, the lead team, and everything else like that. There are so many of you guys that are doing the things that you're called to do. We are a church of individuals, right? Just like the body is a body of parts that works together, right? And we need to continue on to be that type of church that is loving and caring and compassionate and joyful and has expectations for one another, but holds those expectations in love. And so, as we continue on, we never know how far someone is down that line. The invalid, 38 years, right? Waiting. Didn't know Jesus was coming down the road. What if he had given up in year 37? Okay? The paralyzed man. What if he wasn't at the gate that morning when Peter and John walked through? Does he get his healing? Probably not. As a church, I want to encourage you to continue on doing all the things that we are doing as a church. Because we as a church do not know who's coming down the line and how long down that line they are. So take heart, continue doing what we are called to do as a church body. Some of you are so fulfilling in the things that you do. Some of you guys have far-reaching ministries beyond these walls, which is what we're called to do. Continue on with that. Be encouraged by that. Continue doing the things you're called to do. And as a church body, we will continue as a body to do what Jesus expects us to do as a church body. That's all I have for this morning. Hopefully you got something out of that. Let's close in a word of prayer. Lord, we just thank you for this morning. We thank you for your words. We look to your word daily in our life. I just pray that you would continue to use your word. Use us as a church body to continue to do the expectations you have of us. If there are people that don't know their expectations, Lord, I pray that you would just open those doors of expectations in their life. Help them to understand their passion, their motivation, things that will drive them to bring others into the fold. We pray that you would continue to use your word in our life. I just ask that you watch over all my brothers and sisters this morning, and we pray for Pastor Kim and Janice that they continue to be refreshed in your spirit and your word as their way to cover them in transportation and safely as we return. We just ask that you would just protect us all as we go about our day and our weeks. We ask this in your name. Amen. All right, in the spirit of Pastor Kim, greet 2 or 3 people and you are dismissed.